Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Eljay Johnsen Show. This show airs every single weekend, every Saturday at 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, unless specified otherwise over on Twitter at the Eljay Johnsen, where you can get all sorts of updates and guest announcements every single Tuesday. If you have any questions over the week, make sure to email me at ljjohnson@gmail.com, and we will work on getting to your questions toward the end of the show for the guest today. And remember, that's Johnsen. I know it's a tad peculiar, but I swear, the more you get into LEGO, the more you'll find people ending with en than on. So, okay. That gets everything out of the way. Let me go ahead and introduce my next guest. I'm super excited to have him here. He is the co-founder, or at least founder for possibly one of them, IowaLUG and IdahoLUG. A lot of I's. And of course, a small kit builder and large model builder. So I'm incredibly excited to have him on. I'm, of course, talking about Scott Bowman. How are you doing today?
Great. And you?
I'm doing swell. It's a little warmer than I'd like, but I'm hoping it's autumn now, so.
Well, and I'm going to miss summer. I'm a summer person now. So.
Oh, gosh, we couldn't disagree more. I can't stand summer. It's awful to me.
It's too... I like the temperature. I don't like the humidity like in Iowa. So that's one nice thing that's really nice about Idaho and Boise is the no humidity.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yeah, I recently, of course, went over to Brickfair, Virginia, and every single time I go, I see people just glistening. They look like they've been oiled up. That's how shiny they are.
And not in a sexy way.
No, not at all. It's just everyone's all muggy and sweaty and hot, and it's like, ugh.
And grumpy.
Yeah. So that's why I'm far more of a fan of cooler temperatures, especially compared to where I'm from, which is like California. So, ugh.
Yeah. Anytime you're close to the ocean.
Basically, yeah. But, yeah, so how have you been? I'm sure we're going to talk about quite a lot today pertaining to LEGO.
Absolutely. It's hard to get me to stop talking about LEGO, much less start.
That's okay. I prefer it that way. That way it's an interesting conversation. Once you get someone talking about something that they really enjoy, then it's really fun to listen to. So I figured we'll go ahead and start doing that.
Good.
So, all right. In that case, my usual starter question is, how did you first get into LEGO? How did you get into building? And how did you get into the broader community?
Sure. So I'm just a titch older than you are, LJ.
Yeah, a little bit.
And even a little older than Kevin Hinkle. But I got into it as a kid because my mom is 100% Danish. She was the firstborn of immigrants that got married from Denmark. So both her mom and dad were Danish. So Lego comes out, in the, or at least the plastic iteration comes out in the 60s. And very early on, I was getting some of those sets, but I was also an avid builder of plastic models. I did sketching, I did drawings, and my mother was a commercial artist, and my dad was a architect engineer. So I kind of had that in my bones as far as this building and wanting to assemble things and whatnot. So there was kind of that early stage of building with Lego, building with different tools and those types of things. And then I got into cars, and it really was building and restoring sports cars primarily, and a lot of friends, and got involved in kind of the sports car club kind of stuff. And then, of course, got into college and high school and college and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't do very much of pure Lego except for the occasional set that would come out that I just had to have. And then it wasn't until probably, be in my 40s. So this would have been maybe 15 years ago. I started to kind of discover this idea of mocks and, building something out of Lego. and a couple of very initial builds I did related to Denmark. The first thing was actually a large vase that I made for my mother, and it was about talk about diving in. It was 1,700 bricks, and of course I had to mock it up with what bricks I had, and then I went on to God forbid onto the pick a brick wall on online to order the brick. So this is the most expensive vase on the planet, and and built it, and I didn't know anything about digital design, nothing, none of those tools. I was really just kind of doing it, building a mule, building a prototype, then I'd order the brick and I would build it. And of course, being in Des Moines, Iowa, it really didn't have access to a Lego store. So, PAB walls were far and in between. Didn't even really know what PAB stood for, at that point. Mm-hmm. And then it was kind of later as I was, my wife had a colleague that was working with her at her company, and they introduced us, introduced the husbands, right? And it was probably the biggest mistake of both their lives, because it turned out that Chris Hettinger was super into Lego. He had just gone to Brick World in Chicago and had started collecting mostly used brick at that point, and kind of had some dreams. And of course, they're a younger couple than my wife and I, but it just kind of ignited. And it was at a place where I was getting out of the car business. I was getting out of racing. And so I wanted to somehow have a creative outlet. And I'd already been playing with it a little bit and coming up with just things for my mother primarily that were related to Denmark, almost exclusively a Danish flag was involved somehow. And so lots and lots of white and red brick. So Chris and I really got to be very, very close friends, and kind of like that younger mentor professionally. But he was really, he was my protege kind of from a professional getting into business, that kind of thing. But he was my mentor related to Lego, and and of course we couldn't just jump in with something small. We decided to form a lug, and part of that forming a lug was, why not, let's have a show, let's have a party. So we decided to do a large scale build that was going to build the community, and come back to kind of how do we engage kids? How do we get people? And of course, I was very much into STEM, and, making sure that all children had a vision of themselves in a technical field, and that kind of thing. So this all worked together to get us started with the Science Center of Iowa, and building that building out of about 70,000 Lego, and doing an event. And it really got us, full force train wreck into the whole community. And so we weren't, we decided to just crash the party instead of just join it. And learned a lot, right? And made tons of mistakes, but I think we learned from all of those and really didn't look back. We formed a very successful LUG. The LUG still exists. It's doing well. It's had some ups and downs, primarily when Chris has a child, but it's kind of back on its rise, and it's got much more involvement on multiple people. And so, that was kind of getting into the community, and, having something like Brick World as an introduction to a community is fabulous. It's really a good way to quickly meet some of the really founding people in the business. That's where I met Kevin Hinkle. That's where I met Joe Mino, Adam Reed Tucker even. So these are all people that I got to meet at Brick World, and many of them are still friends that I communicate on a regular basis with. So it really has it's really become a passion with, but not just as the Lego building, but it's also my connection to kids and how do I get them enthused about the community of technology, the engineering, science, math, the idea of those things that are going to help us solve the problems we've got right now. So that's really, I don't know if I got the whole thing covered, but that's kind of a very quick view of how I progressed.
Fair enough. I mean, that condenses many, many years very quickly. So I appreciate that. Okay. So, like I mentioned to you prior, and I want to touch upon very first, real quick, I do have an image of the vase, or at least a form of vase that you did create on screen right now. And it's, gosh,
yes,
it continues to floor me how people are able to make curvatures out of brick. Like, that's great.
And can you believe that I was doing that before I really knew anything? You know, there was no computers. I had to just kind of come up with that. Being a sketcher, and I still sketch quite a bit, even when I'm building or designing, I sketch. Just the other day, I was doing something and I had to figure out, you know, how many plates difference and how was I going to make this profile. And frankly, I sketched my own, instead of taking the time to find my Lego profile brick tablet paper that I print out. I just drew one quick because I only needed about, 15 by 15 to figure out my little problem. And, so this whole idea that I did that, and I think you're looking at the Danish flag version, which was the second vase I made. The first one was for Mom. That was 1700, and it was, and it's about 22 inches tall, somewhere in that territory. And studs exposed, all red. And I thought, to fit with the whole theme of the Danish flag, I was going to make one for myself, again, to kind of show off what I could do and build something I could show at Brick World and some of that kind of stuff. So, of course, I get started on making it a Danish flag. And now I'm designing it in Lego Digital Designer. I'm, procuring the brick in a much more fiscally responsible manner and, learning about BrickLink. And this is a little before we even decided to do the project. So we were still, as far as finding brick, those types of things. But the interesting thing was I wanted to express the white on the inside and the outside. And so, this turns out to be somewhat of a structural issue in that, if I just built it that way, then it would fall apart in about 8 pieces from the top, right? Because the center white can hold everything together, but only from that level down, not that level up. So there's actually several layers that are 3 studs deep in typical, so that I can then have one stud that is connecting it so that it's rigid and it all fits together and you can actually pick it up. Although it's quite painful to pick up because of all the sharp edges. And there's nothing more sharp than a brand new Lego brick on the corner. And this is all corners. So then, of course, I even went one step farther, decided to go smooth, so it's tiled with hundreds of 1x1s that have to be aligned. And I have since had nightmares about 1x1s and having to align them. And in fact, it formed all my work to date. I really try to avoid the use of any 1x1 elements, period. That's when I'm building, because to me, that is a variable control person that's actually building the kit is a 1x1. So again, and it can be frustrating because it won't necessarily look like the rendering or the picture. And so anyway, that one's actually 2,700 bricks.
Oh, wow.
And it's one of those things I really love and I like to show. It's actually Bricks and Minifig right now. They've had it for a while. because I'm, again, that's kind of different than some of the other builders. That it's a useful product. My mom used it right. Well, in fact, that vase is still in my father. My mom died 2016, but the vase is still in use in Des Moines, where my dad is.
My goodness, is it used to? Is it just on display? Does it hold anything, perhaps?
This is an interesting story. So it used to have like not I call them weeds, but dried plant material.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the way it was on the mantle for years. And then my mom and dad moved into a retirement apartment, and then it really was just on display. And then when my mom died, we wanted to have a celebration of life. And so mom was cremated, and for that event and for a few months later, it was actually her urn. So I had designed a top that was a Danish flag just for that time span. And now her ashes are up in a cabin that they own in Clear Lake. So it is now back on its display duty. But knowing how much she loved me, how much she loved red, she just everything red was exciting for her. And so it was kind of a perfect place for that temporary use.
Okay. Wow. I mean, I'd say that's creative, but I think this whole thing is. So that's kind of an understatement. But wow, now that's impressive. So I feel my next question, because as you are already well aware, I found out about you. I first heard the name Scott Bowman when I looked at the packaging for, and I'll show this on screen now since I can, there we go, the Brick Idaho. The one on screen, however, is the Brick Idaho with heart. That's not the one I picked up. I just went with the straight old Brick Idaho, nothing on it. And I found
the cheap one.
I found
not that I'm judging. I'm not judging you.
In my defense, I got two. One is a gift for my family, and then one for me. So there, I've made up for it.
Okay. Thank you.
But I found out about this over at the aforementioned Bricks and Minifigs. And for anyone that is unaware, Bricks and Minifig they're a Lego store that is not an actual Lego store, if that makes sense. There's a better way of putting it. It's like a thrift store for Lego.
It is. And it celebrates Lego. And if you build with used brick, it's a fabulous place to go. Because you can get exactly what you want, you can search for quality, all that kind of thing. And if you get to know the owners, you can actually help them sort. So you're helping their business plan, but you also get first dibs on parts. And that's one of our most popular lug meetings, when we help, quote unquote, the store sort buckets and buckets of Lego. But and also sets. So people will bring in sealed sets and sell them to them, and then you can buy them. And I've picked up a few things from them. They kind of know what I'm after, and things that are kind of NASA or space based are obviously pretty popular to me. Mm-hmm. And so coming up with some of that kind of stuff. So it's a great store. Almost every store has somebody that's passionate about Lego, about kids, about creativity. So they're not your typical retail stores by any means.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's especially a fantastic resource for people like us in Idaho who do not have an official Lego store or a pick-a-brick wall or any of that fancy stuff you other Lego fans in other areas have.
The ones I visit whenever I travel, right?
Ah, jeez. Real briefly, did you hear that Lego they're doing this kind of oh goodness, what was it?
Pop-up stores.
Yeah, the pop-up stores. And I looked at the list of pop-up stores that they're doing in all of these different areas. California, I think it was Michigan. All these places already have Lego stores. Come on, Lego. Come on.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I know. And I saw that tweet, I think, this morning. We were probably looking at it at the same time, but I didn't get a chance to follow through on it. So
Yeah.
I wondered if there'd be any in Idaho or not.
No. Also, a brief correction. The Idaho I got was not a plain Idaho. It was Idaho with the American flag. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a very popular one, yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I really like that one. But yeah, actually, on the subject of the little Lego Idahos, obvious enough, how I first found out about you. And this is something that you do. You make smaller kits. And you sell them. So kind of walk us through what that process is, how you started doing that, and basically where things are now.
So I kind of got my taste for doing small builds somewhat from the micro, realm, right? This idea of trying to express a concept or an idea with very few, very small elements. And so I was doing a lot of that. We'll probably talk a little later about the Science Center project. It had a micro. Chris was the primary designer on that, but I've done some other builds since that kind of showed my abilities in that area. And so that kind of got me interested in small, which kind of reads into kits. Now, why my ego wanted to build kits, I'm not quite sure yet. And it's a way to spend a lot of time to make a very little amount of money. But it also, I think, can establish, and I hope it establishes somebody who can do these kind of creative builds that then hopefully engage and broaden our audience, right? And in fact, I think the best sellers, or the ones that sell the best, aren't necessarily in Bricks and Minifig. They're at other stores. They're at other places where you're getting the non-necessary Lego person that is looking at it. Now, I've got to give my spouse some kudos here. Tracy kind of introduced me to a woman named Millie Hilbert, and Millie is really into pop culture. In fact, she's got a store called Repop here in Boise. Wonderful place, great place. If you want anything that is pop culture, this woman is the master. And she did a few things with Lego. And I've got to give her credit, and I do regularly. She did a small version of the Idaho out of brick. And I thought that was really cool. And so I'd been playing around with a little brick version of Iowa before I left. And then that project kind of went on hold as we moved here. And so then I started thinking about that shape. And, Idaho's got a very unique shape as a state. And so I somewhat amped it up. And then I started to think, well, I love being in Idaho. I'm a Dane in Idaho. I started this idea of putting this shape and I do lots of different shapes that go into the basic brick Idaho. And so then I started to think about selling those, coming up with, and that turned into, yet another major learning part on my basis, right? Because there isn't a lot of information about how to do this, and especially instruction kind of thing. So I really had to learn it in kind of myself, starting with Digital Designer and finding different tools. Looking to Eldraw was probably the first one I used. Come up with, because LView, you could generate some views that you could then use in instructions. But and in fact, some of my earlier kit work was based using that kind of stuff. But once I'd gotten to the Idahos, which were really the first product that I was trying to get out there, and there I was using Digital Designer. Then I discovered a software called Blueprint, which is kind of a generator of instructions. and it's the very powerful program with no documentation whatsoever. And so you kind of have to figure it out and come up with ways to use it. And I've gotten fairly good at it, as you would if you keep using it over and over again.
Yeah.
And so then that just kind of got me into the instructions, and then I had to pick the packaging, and then I had to do the marketing on the packaging and that kind of stuff, and then pack it and buy it. Procurement is really one of the largest parts of many of these projects. That coming up with a plan to buy brick is not a haphazard thing, and I have a spreadsheet from hell that because I'm an engineer, right? So I can solve anything with a spreadsheet, and so it's really interconnected. Although, well, that's a whole nother story about I had a little mistake in my references, and I ended up, the green 2x4 brick with Idaho on it. I ended up getting an extra 100 of those because I got it mixed up with 2x4 green bricks that I needed. And so I blindly followed and so Tommy Armstrong, my printer of choice and a longtime partner, brick engraver, he got a nice order. So if he's listening, Tommy, I'm not going to be ordering 2x4 brick with Idaho on it for a long time. So so don't worry if you don't see that order. You see all the other colors. But so this idea of putting the kit together, I don't know. I'm having fun doing it. I love the design process, creative process, and I like having the kits out there, and so I'm coming up with new ones. I'm coming up with different series. I'm coming up with different kinds of builds. I'm trying to get into corporates, would do exclusives. The first one that hired me to do that was Bricks and Minifigs. So you can buy one that's it's actually white with a green heart, or a red heart, and it says Bricks and Minifig in their logo, and that's only available from the Idaho store. And so kind of a fun way, and there are ongoing discussions about for other Bricks and Minifig stores. So it's just something I really kind of got into doing, and it feeds into almost everything else I do, just because of the idea of supporting larger events. Often you have an event kit, or you have something. Brick World always has an event kit. I need to convince Brick Slopes to do an event kit. They hire me. Cody, if you're listening, please hire me. Let me do the event kit. So again, these are all things that fed into this desire to really make Lego somewhat of a profession, and right now it's third of kind of my triad of what I'm doing in my early retirement, but in many ways it's consuming a lot of the time because luckily I've been doing the other two for a long time, so I'm not having to do as much development time on those. So again, it's just something I really love doing, and I think there's a demand out there for this. And the downside is that buying brick third party is expensive. No matter how you buy it, the best I've been able to get to is about 12 or 13 cents an element over average. And if you buy a brand new Lego, 6, 7. So, and so that just becomes that price point. So I've internalized that I'm an artist and I'm selling my art. Not everybody's ready to buy Lego art. They want to buy Lego sets. Well, I'm not doing Lego sets. I'm doing Lego kits that are art.
And that's a very interesting distinction there. And that's not one that I've really heard before. So, is that kind of the? I figured that would change a lot of the perspective going into making something like the Brick Idaho, and I figured that would kind of fuel other projects. Like you're not necessarily going to say do a Lego. I have to look at my map. Pick a random state, Minnesota. Like you wouldn't just do a Lego Minnesota just for the heck of it. You want to do something that you're invested in, that you want to artistically represent and put out there.
Yes and no. I think initially it was that way. Again, I can't tell you how many people have said they want the whole United States.
Yes.
It's on my list.
Thank goodness.
It's on. It's something I would like to pursue. I did a Utah for brick slopes. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, I think the hardest one you're going to have to run into is Colorado. I mean, look at that dynamic shaping.
Absolutely. Well, and then you get into all the southern states. Primarily, I have to put some stanchion. So all of a sudden, if I'm going to leave it this is getting really techie here, but all of my brick Idahos are 2 studs deep, and 3 studs at whatever is sticking out of it. And so to have a stand that would then hold it in the attitude you're used to seeing it, basically looking at a map of the United States. So now if I want a map that will fit together and stand alone.
Oh gosh.
Only an engineer is going, that is fun. And so again, I have so many things on my plate, but I have had, again, discussions with Bricks and Minifig, who has 40 stores now, and all over the country, all over they just had their first store in Canada.
Oh yeah, I did hear about this.
So I think that if anybody's going to pull me into, it's going to be Bricks and Minifig, because there I can directly see, because the time it takes for me to come up with the design is actually the smallest part of the process. It's not always true, but my microfighters, that's not quite true. I've had to do quite a bit with that from a tinkering basis. But the brick Idahos, once I have an idea, I come up with a prototype pretty quickly. Then the process of turning it into a kit is really much more complex, and you and I have talked about doing a series, and it would have to be a series of classes on how to do a kit, because each step has some unique aspects and things that are difficult, things that are hard to necessarily do if you've never done them, so hopefully that's on my list too.
Heck yeah.
So the idea of once I've decided I'm going to kit, I've really committed to sometimes a couple of years worth of time. This microfighter series that I keep saying I'm going to have out by the end is I'm working on 2 years now with that. And some of that's just, I have something that sells. And so, I'm kind of really trying to go where the money is to a certain extent to get the Idahos out there. Luckily, my wife, who is kind of ending her career as a rock star at Simplot as a director, she loves putting the kits together, which is kind of my least favorite part of the job now, once I kind of got it done. So she loves doing it because she can she says she can come do it. She's gotten really good at it, fast at it. And so we kind of have this little cottage industry. So luckily she likes to do that. So and I've got 3 or 4 stores that have really supported me over the long haul in the last couple of years. So I really try to get them stuff as much as they want, and so that's a commitment that I've got to have some passion in order to sustain me. I can't just do it because I want to make money. I'm not that. The making money part is important. So as long as the idea that it's going to sell plus my passion for either the subject or the challenge have to align, and then I'm full on, full go.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's, if you're really interested in doing, it's got to be on a subject that you like, and kits are different than, Marianne down in Salt Lake City, incredible builder. She does some amazing stuff. And she used to work for Lego and Merlin Entertainment. And her expression of this is commissions, which I'd love to do. But also she does, jewelry and earrings and stuff like that. And they're all glued. They're ready to go. They aren't a kit. A kit just adds another level of complexity to the design issue, and so that I like the kits thing because I like kits and I'm in it, right? So to me, my preference would always be to do kits, not necessarily to do sculpture per se. But that doesn't mean I'm turning down any commissions. Any commissions, I'm all for.
Okay. Now, I feel that that's a really excellent segue into the next aspect of what you do, which really, really, I've gotten to see this firsthand, and it's unbelievably impressive. And that is when you say sculptures. The thing that comes to my mind, obviously enough, would be the vase, the aforementioned vase, in addition to the Saturn V. Now, I've got a picture of it up right now. You brought it down to Brick Slopes in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I got to see you finish building this, or assembling it at the very least, over at the public library in Boise, which is the capital of Idaho, for those who are unaware Idaho exists. So tell me a little bit about this process, because obviously enough, I've gotten to see like the slices of it. I've seen you disassemble it fully, and it's incredibly impressive, but kind of, no pun intended, break down how you actually went about this project.
Okay, so the IdahoLUG, or the IowaLUG, I'm getting my eyes confused. I mentioned earlier that we launched the IowaLUG with this, and we called it Brick Built Science Center of Iowa. And kids helped us build a 70,000 piece version of the building. Again, learned a lot on that process. And now I've moved out of Iowa, lost my best buddy, Chris Hedinger, on being able to do these events. So I'm kind of on my own doing this event. And I also had this weird idea for Idea Brickworks, which is my Lego persona. And I thought, well, I really want to do corporate events. I love STEM. STEM is really important to me. STEAM, add art into it. So I said, I want to do another event. And I had gotten exposed to Boise State University and their Engineering and Science Festival. And we had started as the LUG, the IdahoLUG, to start to support them. And that was going really well. And so I started to think about STEM and the project we do with the Science Center. I said, I want to do another event like that, but better, right? I wanted to do something that would celebrate technology at the same time as building something really cool. Okay, so at the core of it, I wanted to build something cool. Okay, so it does start with a little bit of self-interest. I don't know that you could ever do an event where you don't have something invested.
Yeah.
I wanted to engage STEM. I wanted kids to help because, designing it is fun, but putting one brick inside of the other isn't always the most exciting part of a project, right?
Yeah.
So this idea of getting free labor also had some attraction. So I started thinking about the things that didn't go well on the Science Center, and one of those was how to have something that kids could build that both was a learning moment, but also it was easily organized. And so I really not exactly sure how the idea of the Saturn V came into my, that might have been around, I started thinking it about 45th ish. Yeah, I mean, the 50th is next year anniversary. But somehow that got to my head. I started to think about, well, building this, it could be in sections, and it, each section could, have a group working on it. And so all of a sudden, I don't know. I really wish I knew how inspiration hits, but it did, thank God. Mm-hmm. And this idea of building a Saturn V, and of course, it's got to be big. You just don't dream small. And I was stupid enough to select a scale that was each brick was a foot tall. Okay, sounds good to you. Yeah, and
it's a reasonable way of going about it.
And so, of course, then you start to do the calculation. 373 bricks. The Saturn V is 373 feet tall at 9.6 millimeters. All of a sudden, we're talking 11 and a half frickin' feet. But, I was committed to it. I'd done sketches, it was like, I'm not going back. And I decided I'm just going to keep moving forward. So knowing that I needed to get funding, and a lot of it, the Science Center project, roughly we had to raise, Chris was doing most of the design work on that one, and I was the old guy raising money, and I had to raise about $15,000 for that project all in. So kind of knowing that, I knew it was in that ballpark. So I started to design it because I knew I needed to know a better brick count in order to even go to Lego, go to anybody from a funding standpoint, how to fund this. And frankly, that is the first step in any of these big events, is understanding how are you going to get the money. And I wanted it to be part of my business too. So I was going to pay something, and that was going to be in the budget, but I had to kind of get what was that outline. Mm-hmm. So I actually designed the whole thing before I really even started talking too much about it, which I tell you what, I can use Lego Digital because of that, right? It's just, I really got pretty good at it. And of course I couldn't ever put the whole model together. 32,000 brick just blows up. Trying to move something is just, so it's all in sections. Even ultimately, there are 69 different models in LDD because of each segment, just because of the way I was breaking it down in instructions and what. But, so I had to have that design. Then, again, inspiration struck, and I started to there's an article actually coming out in the next issue of Brick Journal that Joe Mino did or does and will do, right? This is a future event. Mm-hmm. He kind of reminded me of this in that I have this really favorite t-shirt. In fact, it's just about to the point where I'm going to have to get it replaced. And it's failure is not enough, kind of going back to Apollo 13. And I love this kind of technical font, this tall, skinny font. And it's also, this is not Ted, it's Krantz, but I can't think of his first name, the mission control person. Mm-hmm. Wrote the book, and it's on his book cover as well. But somehow STEM Moonshot got into my head. And once it got into my head, it left it. And so now I had a title. I had a design-ish, right? I had enough idea that it was going to be in the 30,000 brick range at that point. Now I needed some money because I knew I couldn't really go to Lego through the community support program or project support program that is offered to Lego user groups without knowing what the scope was, right? I needed to understand where this was going. And so now I'm starting to build an event, right? And so I talked to BSU. BSU is over the top about it. They love the idea. They want to be involved. They can't bring a bunch of money, but by gum, the venue, students, mentor students, that I didn't have to worry about. Mm-hmm. Even piggybacking things like I had a few shirts that were specific to STEM moonshots, but every shirt for that year had STEM moonshot on. So we kind of piggybacked these on it, the whole thing. So I had them. And then I was trying to get funding, and I knew I had to go to people like Micron or HP or, some of the big players to try and get money. Mm-hmm. And I had no network, right? I just moved. I've only been here. People don't really know me. They don't know me as an engineer. I went to mostly my friends in Iowa to get the $14,000 I needed for that. And everybody was very generous to me there. And then I heard about the STEM Action Center, the Idaho STEM Action, and set up a meeting and went in, and I had a PowerPoint that showed some of the stuff that and where I was going to go, and a rough idea. At that time, I was thinking maybe 20,000, maybe 25,000. And so I get to this meeting, and I start to talk about it, and her name is Erica Compt, wonderful, that is a teacher by her profession, but now works with the STEM Action Center as program director. And I'm talking and I'm saying, I need some seed money in order to, kind of get that next donation, right? So I was kind of actually going in that meeting thinking, oh, if I could get $2,000, that'd be a win, Mm-hmm. So I go in and we start to do the meeting and kind of get to the ask part, right? And, as an engineer and as a pitching things. And so I was trying to give her this, and I get to that ask, and she says, just hold on a minute, Scott. I'm sold. I think we can fund this whole thing. How much do you really need?
Oh my goodness.
And I'm like, what? So of course I added $5,000. I said, well, $25,000. Oh, I think we can do that.
Oh my gosh.
Shit. Now I gotta, so that really did launch it. And she couldn't commit at that meeting, but she says, I think I've really good message. You are just incredibly aligned with everything you do. And so ultimately they did give me $25,000 funding. They also gave another $5,000 to BSU to kind of, knowing that my event was going to consume a lot of work and a lot of other resources, along with what they normally did for this festival, that they kind of handled all the money, So really that really said, okay, I've gotten now I have, and luckily I could somewhat ignore a lot of these operational venue issues because I have a great partner in the woman that's kind of heads up some of this outreach and counseling at BSU, Leandra, and she would kind of handle that side of it, and I was handling the event and designing the event, and I hired a graphic artist, and Johnny Smith is his name, and all of a sudden I'm building this team, I'm building a network, right, of people that can help me make this dream come true, of which many were LUG members and became even more diehard LUG members because of their involvement. And so it really became this overall event that had this Saturn V in the middle of it. And of course, then now I got to order brick, right? So I got approved by Lego, the brick it cost. And so, because they don't give anything free. And so now I've got to actually turn it into brick. So I actually went through, and I wouldn't call it a redesign, but it was definitely a optimization program. And so I was optimizing the. Then, of course, I finally get access to the Lego ring system. And guess what? Some of the brick I wanted was available. So now, third time through the model. By this time is 69 models because it's 69 segments. And, you know, coming up with that final procurement spreadsheet, I could then get the order. And, you know, and turn it into that part of the event. And now if you think about it, and we'll have to get to that second part of this story, I was designing all the activities. So, you know, we had lots of different ways to use Lego to really engage with kids. One of them was a free build table. That's kind of our basic go-to for any meeting. Kids love to build with a monochromatic and or very limited element set of brick. So we put 20,000 brick on a table and let the kids go. And the stuff we get is over the top. Anybody that does not believe that Lego cannot encourage creativity hasn't seen this activity. They think of it as kids, and it's so much more. And so that's one. Then we've got the design within construction. Over the past 5 years, how to use Lego to show engineering, the concept of problem solution, solving problem. And that was incredibly successful. Come again, a go-to. I've done it in many, many different venues, or even down to schools. And I have different ways I engage with that project. Then, of course, we had a mock show. So we showed what people can build with it and how you can build with Lego, mostly space themed or Star Wars or something like that. We had a great ball contraption, which is the ultimate in expressing mechanical operations, you know, kind of the rope or Rob Goldberg machine, you know, this idea of moving the ball. And then we also had a mosaic build. And so kids were building on a 16 by 16 stud plate, a portion of the micro or of the mosaic, and nobody knew about what the final would be. And it turned out to be the STEM Action Center's logo, which is on display in their offices too. So that was kind of my give to them. So it's a very expensive mosaic. When you think about how much time, but it got touched by a lot of kids and a lot of kids that learned about STEM. But then then there was the build. So the collaborative build was half hour, 8 to 12 kids help build with a mentor to build a section that was 5 bricks tall and had a build. And so going through that process, those were the major events. One of the other things that I think is really important, and it can somewhat take over an event, is this idea of the idea of something that they can take away. And it was very important to me that this project had that component. But I had learned from the Science Center project where we had built 500 kits in boxes, the directions, and packaged them all beforehand, all stuff that I never wanted to get. It really took over the project. So mine was either going to be a make and take or the kit, you know, and you take it. You don't. The instructions were either going to be online, you know. So of course, what I came up with was the microsat, and I think you've got an image of that
I should. Let me check here. No, that's the module. Let me see. I do have the picture. Let me just go ahead and bring that up real quick. There it is. Yes. Okay. So here's the image.
Okay. So the idea of a takeaway for a kid in this kind of event is kids are, their direction is taking competition from our devices, from everything, from the world. And so having something solid that they can look at as time goes on to remind them of their learning, what they learned and why they were excited, is very important. We found that with the Science Center. Kids, for years afterwards, always talk micro and how fun it was to build and what they learned on the day. So I wanted that same thing with STEM Moonshot. And so the Micro Saturn V, that was a fairly big part of the project, except I was going over the top, right? I wanted to give out 2,000 of them, okay? And I just told you I was never going to do 500 as a boxed kit again. So I wanted 2,000. As I'm finalizing 5,000 I could do 1,000, couldn't do 2,000. So that's where Micron came in. I did go another 3,000, so that in that I was able to get into 1,800 or another 800 kits. So overall, we did 18 of the Micro Saturn to be able to hand out. And as I ordered all the bricks, so I'm pulling all this together, a mosaic, bulk brick for both the design within construction, the free build table. I had the mosaic to do the directions for 36 segments, 36 sets of 69 sets of directions plus 69 segments, plus what turned into I really need templates to help build the segments. So as I look at the event, and I'm really amazed that still, I really should. I didn't get a lot of sleep that last week, trying to get everything pulled together. And you saw it at its best, right? I had already learned a lot. But when I went to order the brick, I ended up ordering 1,000 brick. The build was 32,000. I definitely first because I was associated with Saturn V. In fact, I was working on it this week. But that's the amount of brick that you're talking about. That turned into about $14,000. Came in on a pallet, and 3 pallets actually, and it really was. It was like Christmas. You just it is so much fun to see all that. So that kind of got me into the big event idea. I'd like to do it for corporations. I think I've shown big engagement events. So I want to try and find a way to monetize it because I'd like to keep doing STEM events. And I would like to, but I need to kind of build the corporate world so that I don't have to charge as much for the STEM work, right? There's not a ton of money or going into schools. I wish I had a fund that could just allow me to go into a school with 30, 40 kids and do a 2-hour thing about Saturn and not have to charge anything, So, I did turn the Saturn V that is now available. I've sold actually a fair number of them first group, and it turns out there's one part in there. I now own all but maybe a couple hundred in North America. It turned out that it's the most expensive part, and I need 8 of them in each kit. And so I just was buying up as many as I could get at under $1, basically, and $1 each. So that kind of set part of the price right there. Anyway, so that's kind of my methodology of the big events, the takeaways, the kits,
Mm-hmm.
mosaics, all the different activities. And they're a lot of fun, or at least tell me this side of manic during the events. And so a lot of it's, did that go well?
Yeah.
It's still okay. I thought it went well, but I was also just freaking out most of the time. But again, it's a good freaking out. It's a good chaos
Yeah.
and a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. I've gotten to see, obviously enough, some of it. And it seems like when you had the event at the library, getting to see everyone invested, engaged, everyone was building something. It didn't matter if it was the Saturn V or the free build over to the right. There was building happening. People were expressing a lot of enjoyment and creativity in the project, and they were having a good time. And obviously enough, seeing the final result of the Saturn V is immensely impressive.
Yes.
So I think your goal was definitely accomplished, although that's one heck of a story.
No one asked for the Spanish Inquisition. But yeah, I think it is a defining project for me, and I'm touring around with the rocket. I to get around to more places. I'm hoping that it leads into a little more Idea Brickworks work.
Mm-hmm.
But I also just love supporting STEM events. I am talking, while I've got 3 other STEM events that are being discussed. One is actually getting to the discussion phases at BYUI, and then another alum of BYU City would like to start talking. And then Joe Mino's got me looking at a project in DC.
Oh, wow.
So recently I've had this learning experience of ship, about 50,000 brick, because it'd be about the 32,000 that is the Saturn V to Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy.
No.
So
nothing about this seems... I don't think easy is the word I would use.
no. So it's fun to explore these new ideas, these new ways to do it. I'd love to take it to Bricks by the Bay. BrickCon's coming up. I think you're going.
Unfortunately, I need to make the announcement on Twitter. Unfortunately, plans fell through again this year. Yeah, it seems it's a recurring trend. Like, I think once I do make it there, like the planets will have aligned. It's like, all right, you can go to BrickCon now. You're good.
You and me both, brother.
Maybe we could both go one year. That'd be fun.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I really wanted to go, but I've got a couple of things that need to happen. I dearly love to go. I kind of think of Brick home show in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Got started. I'd love to take it back there. I still feel robbed from not winning the best mega project, so I want to get back into that game again.
Mm-hmm.
We were nominated with the Science Center, and we lost to a minifig scale Destiny spaceship that both Chris and I almost voted for, even though Chris was also in that one. But so I'd love to take it around a little. And once I kind of figure out how to do it, there are obviously people doing it.
Yeah.
Leah Chen is a real hero of mine. Down in Houston is just over the top with the NASA stuff. And she really likes my build. I almost got her up here for the STEM Moonshot event. And so I'd love to go down to Brick Fiesta, which is kind of her show. She doesn't run the show, but she always shows there.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'd love to take it around and share with the community, broader community. I'd be able to.
Mm-hmm. And that makes sense. Yeah, no, that's perfectly understandable. Well, let me see here. I do have another inquiry. pertaining to these, and I think it's the question in my mind that's really it's permeated while I've been listening to you discuss the process to get the Saturn V to completion. And it seems like there are a lot of similarities between kit building and model building. You have to get a lot of parts if you want to make a lot of kits, and you have to get a lot of parts if you want to make a large model. But what have been the greatest similarities and the greatest differences and the greatest challenges pertaining to each facet of model building versus kit building?
The procurement is actually fairly similar. I made a big push because I had a local store, and so I wanted to kind of up my stock, and I had a couple of new ones, including the Saturn V kit that I had to procure privately because any brick you get from Lego, you cannot resell. It's got to be used for the project, and so that's kind of spoken. So I had to privately procure that. I had 6 or 7 that I have pretty much, and then I had 2 new ones that I was just bringing out for the first time. And I ended up procuring about 14,000 brick privately. And I was late, as I often am, on ordering, and so I really didn't want to get into the DHL overseas, and so it had to all come from North America. Ended up getting it from 21 vendors, which is probably my record as far as number of vendors that I get to. But again, I've got a process kind of brings together. I decide the kits I'm going to build, a bill of material for each kit. I then put that into its own page on my spreadsheet. Then that spreadsheet can, as long as I've inputted the element from Bricklink and I have their average price, then as I'm ordering, I've judged how, so I set that parameter, my list, my wanted list, I have prices, and I usually go 2 cents above average a goal for each individual. Then I go in and buying. And I did it once using algorithm, and it worked. I'm not positive. It took a lot less work, but it was also with vendors that I have not used since, because I have some favorites I go to, and I have some
feel
locals.
Like we all do. Like we all have a Bricklink store is like, you know what? I like this one. This one I'm going to order from this one again.
Yeah, and some give me a discount no matter what, just because I've been ordering from them and forever, 2 years, 3 years, right? Seems like forever. And so, that process is actually pretty simple. You got to, because there's common brick and then there's unique brick for each build. And so the way my spreadsheet works, each individual item I put in, I've got my own little unique system that is a little more keyed to Bricklink versus Lego. Lego has the 6 to 7 digit number that both expresses element and color, which you need to know if you're working program, because that's the only numbers they know, that not the other ones that Bricklink does. So there's some give and take there, but then it is querying all these spreadsheets into a procurement. So now I can just focus that, I need 600 of this element, 500 of. So I'm no longer thinking of kits as much as my bulk buy and how much I need to. And I can, I give myself a target for the percentage shipping and other charges. Some stores charge a shipping and handling fee, some don't. Some give me a discount, some don't. Sometimes I have coupons. I kind of know who they are now. because that coupon is worth as much as 30%.
Oh,
So
goodness.
as I'm procuring brick, I have to look at that store, and I'm actually playing with the 30% I know. So it's kind of there's a fair amount of math. I'm using a lot of STEM skills. If you haven't figured this out, on this, and I can, I think I'm doing pretty good. First few stores I go to, there are 3 local that I can actually save all my shipping if I basically, they leave them out on their porch and I go get them.
Oh, goodness.
So that's a start. Or sometimes they build to my porch, so because they're in the lug, so so I know those 3. I've got one in Mass, friend of mine, Matt Thompson, who used to be from Iowa. He's still my go-to store. He's got very consistent pricing. He's incredibly organized. He's a computer programmer. So you can imagine how organized. And he's fast for me. In fact, it's funny. Sometimes it's shipped at the same time I'm paying. He knows I'm going to pay. So it's like the guy knows me, and that's another long story. He's got me. He actually designs now for IowaLUG. So, and I am a Roomba addict and a pusher. So I think he's never used his discount. I've used it 16 times.
Oh, geez.
And luckily it is a friends and family plan. So it's all legit, right? This isn't, but it's a great program. And so they just came out with a new one, with an order. I just sent him yesterday. I said, should I get it? And he goes, Scott, you don't even need to ask. You need to get it. I'll have a code soon. He already knows I'm going to buy that. But so if you'd like a 980 Roomba, talk to me. We'll discuss how I might trade up. And this idea of the procurement is a big part because cost is a major factor on both sides, right? If I'm doing a commission or if I'm doing a local project, for example, STEM Action Center hired me to do 140 brick Idahos that have a brick with their logo on it. And of course, they wanted 4 different colors, and it turns out purple is really hard to and it's expensive. And it turned out what I could normally provide home, I had to go to 11 to cover because of the variance in brick cost, which was the most dramatic I have ever seen. Well, that's not quite true because I'm trying to do a build a brick Idaho that's using matte green or the olive green. That's really expensive. Anyway, so I had to privately procure that. So in that case, I'm trying to keep the cost down, right? I want to maximize my profit, but or if I'm doing a project where brick is an expense, which often if I'm doing an event, I expense the brick. I don't want to take the risk on the brick cost, and so I just quote a fee, and brick would be additional. So you're trying to control costs, right, on those.
Yeah.
And again, that part is turned out to be much more taxing than I thought, but if you want to have enough money to do the project and enough profit to make it something you can do, you've got to spend that time. I've gotten it faster and faster just because I now have the spreadsheet. I now kind of understand how I need moving something forward. Yeah. Now I cannot remember where this question started, so I do not know the answer to it.
No, what were the similarities and the differences between model building and kit building and the greatest challenges?
Right. I'd say one of the big challenge, the design, really, I don't want to say it's the simplest because obviously there's some inspiration that has to come into building small. There's some optimization. sometimes I built something that is really expensive because the part that I decided to use turns out to have not been used. That is a great aspect of the stud.io now that Bricklink offers.
Mm-hmm. I haven't even begun to dabble in that. Like, it looks impressive, though.
It is, and I've actually got the 2.0 that even takes it a few steps farther that I haven't gotten to play with. I've been using it a lot for two things. One is, once you're done with the design, you can export it to a wanted list.
Oh.
That alone is incredibly useful. I don't care about the numbers at that point because I'm going to go back and what I have in stock, quote unquote, thousands and thousands of bricks. Mm-hmm. Then I decide what do I have to order. But just having all the elements input ready to go, then I can put some dollars as to what I think I would pure them at. And then so it really helps that part of the process really, really well. But in a design standpoint, if you're playing around, I think we all kind of intuitively sometimes, my first instinct is the lowest number of bricks.
Of course.
But it's got to be the lowest number of them. And so it's very often I find 2 or 3 bricks might be a better option than I will take a 2x10 of anything brick. A 2x10 is actually quite expensive, unless you're getting the Lego program. It's a whole different ballgame. But if you're privately procuring it, that's very expensive. They just don't make very many in sets, right? So in that case, you've got to think about, am I going to do a 6 and a 4? What's the best way to solve that? And then you get the whole price down. Stud.io really allows you to instantly see that. You can just go to model information, look at the database, and give you a number. I don't trust that number alone because I think it's high. But like anything else, the deltas are really appropriate. So if the brick isn't, so I always try to reduce that, right? So if I can get that, and I play around with different bricks. That used to take a lot, right? If you were going in and just Stud.io really, really helps that process. So when you're designing a kit, the scope and then multiplying it. And so the effort that you put into the design is not necessarily the same as a model, large scale model, because it really is limited to, I think the biggest actual kit I've sold is 104.
My goodness.
And so a lot of small ones. That was a micro reproduction of Boise Art. That was the largest kit that I've made as far as piece count. So, that's a different process. Whereas with the model, here thinking about a model that's 32,000 brick ultimately, all of a sudden the program itself becomes a limitation. So for a long time, I could not really put the whole model together electronically.
Yeah.
Because of the how slow the program was. Lego Digital Designer is pretty limited there. If I get to 10,000, 5,000 in something, it really slows it down. So you segment it, so you're always, and the way I did this, funny thinking about how I mule, I did a lot of sketching, and then I started to build it. Then if I wanted to go to the next segment, I would copy the last couple of rows brick, put them into the next one, and then make them some bizarre color like orange. And that way I knew that I would throw them away at some point because I was building just the way I was pulling it together. So, I got really good at segmenting the model into the segments that were much more workable and much more easy to optimize.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and by the way, one of those redesigns, which I did.
So, my apologies.
You know, in that whole model,
you cut out very briefly. One of the redesigns, and then what was that?
Involved getting rid of all the one by one. I got rid of, in fact, the final build, unless a couple drifted in there. I know I corrected, but they never showed on the other. Because mistakes were made. I'm just saying. Mm-hmm. And I know where all of them are. But the one by ones, it ended up with only 4. Out of the 32,000, there are only 4.
Oh my gosh.
One by ones. And my favorite brick, which you haven't asked that question yet, is the 2x2 corner.
Really?
Absolutely, hands down. Both in plate and brick. It has saved my patootie so many times because it really does lock in, and it can lock things together. So anyway, and there's thousands of those.
Yeah.
As you can see, you know, the way it arbitrarily makes a circle. Mm-hmm. So with a model, the idea in the design, if it's not event oriented, you're kind of done, because that's going to be your instructions. And I've done this a couple of times with larger things. I've just designed them and like the vase, I designed it all. I didn't make instructions. I just brought up Digital Designer and would hide things, right? And that allowed me to build it, you know, just by the way I was hiding things. Mm-hmm. And so I could see it. So if you're just doing the model for yourself or a commission, you know, that is pretty much the end. Once you get the procurement, you get to build. Mm-hmm. In a kit, you have to do the directions. And the directions can either be simple, like I can do a brick Idaho one pretty quickly, done several of them, right? So I have something to base everything on, and I've also just gotten really, really blueprint. But if you think about the event model, I had the worst of everything. So I get to design this humongous model, and I get to do instructions for every single element. Mm-hmm. And those instructions had to be geared that a mentor and 7 to 14-year-olds could build. So I couldn't spend a ton of time doing that, but I had to spend enough time to do it right.
Yeah.
That turned into a much bigger deal. And I actually learned, I started, because of the way it went into Blueprint, I figured out the right way to rotate the model in Lego Digital Designer, then upload it into Blueprint. And I did that in Lego Digital Design in Blueprint. And so, you know, again, these are all weird things that repeat something. Mm-hmm. And so I figured out, but it still took manually moving brick in step for every single set of instructions. I'd say it took from 2 to 4 hours for every set of instructions.
My goodness, that is a time investment.
Oh my God. I really didn't expect that. That was one of the big surprises. And this is a guy that's done a lot of it direction. Yeah. And it still was so, you know, the idea of an event where kids help build it, you've got to factor that in. And so I know that in going forward, you know, I'm enough masochistic, I'm going to do. And now at least I'm going in with my no take, do those directions, because really having those directions allowed all sorts of things to happen so that we really maximized the kids' experience with building. Mm-hmm. Because I had volunteers ultimately sorted all the part for each segment. Mm-hmm. And then we had that in a bag. So at the table, they had the instruction bag and they had a template because as a circle, the first layer could not interconnect. So I had to have a template that tile to kind of get that one plate up and then brick so that it would hold that first layer in when you did the offset brick for the second layer.
Mm-hmm.
And typically my designs were good enough that once you had the second layer on, even though it was probably still a little fragile, you could pick it up and set it down on the table and then start building, because you had the first two. So the kids got, frankly, in that second event, the kids got a lot more building experience than the first event. First event, they had to go find the brick. And it turned out the first half hour found the brick. The second half hour of each segment got to. So I learned a lot, in the process of doing that. I really know how to do this the next now. Not exactly sure what that's going to be yet. I've been thinking a lot about SpaceX. They seem to have a lot of money.
They do. You just got to time it right. You got to time it
exactly.
You have to time it in between Elon Musk public appearances.
The guy is brilliant, and he is falling all over himself on social issues and, worker safety. I'm a huge fan of Tesla, but man, they've got to get their safety record up down at the super factory.
Yeah.
So I'm not a blind follower, but
I'd say a follower of rapt attention would be a good way to describe that.
Yes, and encouragement, right?
Yeah.
Lots of talented people. Really, he has to stop running the business and let an adult handle the business.
Yeah,
and
he needs to get some people to help him.
Kind of like Steve Jobs needed an adult to really make the business work, but you need the bizarre, weird genius, right, to make these breakthroughs, these total changes in the way we think about something. So yeah, anyway.
Yeah, no,
now that's really drifting away from the topic.
Oh yeah, but that's okay. But speaking of a topic, unfortunately, we will have to go ahead and wrap up here. So if there's anything else you'd like to kind of wrap up on that conversation, we'll go ahead and jump into some questions right after that.
No, I'm fine. That's great.
Perfect. All right. In that case, I'm opening up the floor to everyone in the YouTube comments. So if you have any questions, go ahead and ask. And in the meantime, we do have a question sent in by email. Actually, 3 questions, and they're all from an individual named Ulti. And so Ulti's questions are as follows. Firstly, can the vase retain water without leaks?
No.
Have you tried?
No. Lego is not in deal. Yeah, no. It's funny. That question comes up all the time. Now, if you lined it with plastic, yes, it would.
That's fair. That makes sense.
That's fair.
Although, Scott, technically speaking, isn't it already lined with plastic?
Yeah. Good job, LJ. I give you that one.
Thank you. Awesome. So, the next question is, what is Scott's favorite Lego set?
Okay, it's got to be... I have 2. Can I have 2?
You can have 2.
The first one is the Technic Porsche. It's an incredible build. It is fun to build. It's technically challenging. And it's the whole experience from opening the box to building it. And especially if you know anything about cars and Porsche in particular, the whole process is oriented around how they built it. And I now own a Porsche too, so and a 911. So to me, it's still just an incredible build. And yes, it's one of the most expensive kits, but it's really, really worth it. The second one is the Saturn V. I really love that kit. It's playable in that kids that get this kit will have a ton of fun with it. And, that imaginative spirit, I think, could be fed well. So I'm always, I always offer kids that I'll write a note from a professional engineer that your mother and father need to buy you, right? Just to help your education. So I'm totally, all over that. But then the way it comes apart, the book and how it's written and how it tells you about the program, when I do stuff in schools, I use that with the kids coming up and helping me kind of hold it and show them what the stages are and that kind of stuff. I tell you what, I've got them in the palm of my hand, which isn't easy with kids, but because it's Lego, it for some reason, it really gets their attention. They're learning. I can tell they're learning by the questions they're asking, but their attention is held, I think, by Lego. I mean, that really helps.
Yeah.
So those are my two most favorite.
Okay, perfect. And I've got the images of those on screen right now. Obviously, you can discern which one is which, so won't need to describe that.
How'd you know that those were going to be the two?
Oh, because the Saturn V is the orange car that flies, obviously. Come on. And trust me, no, I didn't know that those are going to be the two. I'm just very fast.
You are good at that, then.
Brickset is a wonderful resource. Okay, let me see here. The third question Ulti sent in is, what is Scott's favorite build that he has designed?
Hands down, the Saturn V. You know what? I'm really proud of the event, but I'm also proud at, I've changed it a little bit. Every time I show it, typically there's some improvements made, just because I assemble it and disassemble it. So I'm making it easier to do. But I'm still pretty darn proud about the. Mm-hmm. So I really like the rocket.
That makes sense. That's perfectly reasonable. All right. Now, let's go ahead and get into some YouTube comments here. Let me see. All right, so the first question is from Justin J. Marler, and he asks, Scott, do you think Bionicle is real Lego?
Yes, I do. It's funny. When I first got into cars, I love Porsche. I still do, obviously. But I could only afford 914. Mm-hmm. So that's the baby Porsche. And so I joined this community, and of course I'm frowned upon, except that all the guys that own the most expensive, many of them will have a track day car that's based on a 914 because A, they're inexpensive, and B, they are really pretty fast for what they are. Mm-hmm. So then I go and buy a 911, and I buy a 996 because that's the only one I can afford. Turns out that's the first year that Porsche went to cooling. And now I'm the look down one on that side. And it's like, dudes, it's like, so I don't like the segmentation of a hobby, do I like builds with more elemental or basic pieces? I think it's kind of obvious from what I do that I kind of like this idea of using brick, and by going big, the pixels get small, right? So you can do a lot on a big scale. But to just try and discount something as not real, I've seen some incredible creativity with Bionicle and what do you call it? I can never say it right.
Construction.
Construction. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to me, that's another way people engage with creativity. So, we've got an incredible builder, Jared Sarez, who you met at Comic-Con.
Oh yeah.
Or the Comic Arts Festival.
Yeah.
And he builds these incredible things that scare the bejesus out of me. they're just it's like they're lifelike. You know they're not alive, but it's like they haunt your nightmares. So I do. I think they're real. I think it's a great part of the hobby. Do I think I'll ever get into that? Probably not. You know what? And kind of like trains, I have an incredible amount of respect for Lego trains, but I just don't know that I'm going to get into that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'll never say never, but it just isn't where my passion is.
Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense. That's completely reasonable. All right, excellent. Thank you, Justin J. Marler. It was epic. Epic question. It's a joke he'll get. Okay. So, moving forward, we do have another question by Mac, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that last name. I don't want to risk it for the biscuit. But Mac's question is, what's Scott's favorite theme from recent years?
Ideas. I've bought just about every ideas set that has come out. And really, every one I bought, I have no disappointment. There's always a ton of creativity. There's a ton of kind of unique ways that fairly basic elements get. They tend to also come up with some new parts that become really useful going forward, right? And so I really like the Ideas series. The ones that were kind of space oriented, Curiosity, I love that set. I bought actually one of the not Mariner. Oh, the one that went to Jupiter.
Oh, oh goodness. Yeah, it's slipping my mind too.
And it's the same designer that did the or the Curiosity. And I bought one of his kits mostly to support him. And it's a fun little. So again, I just think the Ideas kit is, I'd say my second one right now is, even though he didn't ask, is Speed Champions, because I love cars and I don't have to buy big ones, right? So, don't tell my wife, but I buy all the Speed Champions, but I don't build the accessories. That just goes right into parts inventory. I just want the cars, so I love it when the cars come out alone, but they don't always do it. Some of the best ones are in a set, and so I get the whole thing, and then I.
Mm-hmm. That's reasonable. Okay. In that case, let me see here. Here we go. Snake Jaguar asks, what was your first and then your latest Lego set?
The first one that I remember was, I think it was actually the second Technic car. Now, this is the one that actually had 4 engine, and while there's nothing that says on that, and it's a rear-engined car, it's basically a Volkswagen chassis is what it is, even though it doesn't say that. I think those parts are still somewhere in my collection, right? I have all the Legos from a kid, although I've culled out the white because it was faded. I've culled out the yellow. I've culled out the grays just because of the change in color stuff. But I know I still have the tires, the wheels. They were the big ones, and they didn't look like car tires at all. So I'd say that was my first one. What was the one? I'd say the latest one I bought was the Statue of Liberty and the Great Wall. I pretty much buy every architecture model that comes through. Now, the last one I just built the one of the Ferrari's Speed Champion. Just came out this last year.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, the professional racing series I work for, those cars that Ferrari just actually won the championship. So,
Oh, wow.
So I know those cars very well. In fact, most of the cars are in my series. So,
Oh, goodness. And then for anyone wondering, there are a few images of the Great Wall of China and the Statue of Liberty. Really, honestly, substantially impressive architecture sets. Like,
they really are.
I'm fond of architecture, but at a distance. Like, I feel that the only few that I would get personally, because, I have an obvious investment, would be ones from the United States. Like, for whatever reason, I decided, and I'm just going to pass on buying the White House when I went to the White House in 2016, which, in retrospect, was not my brightest move. But next time, maybe. But seeing these, of course, are the different scale is immensely impressive. Architecture sets are always a spectacle.
I have a great picture that is very treasured. That is me buying the architecture Burj Khalifa model, first one, the one that just came out, at the top, on the Burj Khalifa at the floor 125 in Abu Dhabi or in Dubai. So I got to travel there, and I knew that they'd have it. They had to have had it, So sure enough, at the top, I was able to buy it and get a picture with me picking it up.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's a whole nother hour. We could just talk about Dubai, Abu Dhabi, but that'd be more of a technical engineering discussion. So
that's fair. And I'm sure as anyone can hazard a guess, I am not very well versed in any of that. All right. In that case, let me see here. I will go a few more questions, and then we'll have to go ahead and wrap up. This next one is from Brian Porter, who asks, if you are only allowed to build in one color branch, reds, blues, etc., which would you choose?
Red.
Makes sense.
And I'd add white to it if I could. But yeah, red and white, my favorite.
Fair enough. Alti asks, favorite brand of car? And I feel like I know the answer to this one.
Porsche, hands down. Yep. Although Lexus is a good second, because I got an X450 hybrid, which the Saturn V fits in. Barely.
Well, at the very least, that's good, because you kind of have a lot of components to that. I've seen you box it up. There's a lot to that.
There is. And it all fits. So
thank goodness. The Cultus, and I don't know if that's a Bionicle reference or not, because it's spelled differently, but I digress. They ask, what LEGO idea set would you recommend?
Definitely the Saturn V. I know it's a broken record. There are so many aspects to that set. The build technique is fascinating. It's a combination of snot, but the way they are getting round shape is really unique. Partially it's curved brick, but some of it's flat brick, but because of the snot technique, it's really kind of held on a radius at a 45-degree angle. So it's a fascinating build technique. And then just the educational component is just over the top. So, yeah, Saturn V, hands down.
That makes sense. Perfectly understandable. And, of course, for anyone wondering, there it is on screen. That's a Saturn V from LEGO Ideas. All right, fair enough. In that case, we'll have one more question here. And we'll go ahead and make it this one. This is from... Oh, dear goodness. I'm going to try for the first name, but the last one... Wow. Metazus? Apologies if that was incorrect. Did you like LEGO Rock Raiders? If you're familiar with
I don't know. Is that the one that had the big drills?
Let me double check because there are a few different. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's the one with the drills.
I think that might have been. I don't know if that was just coming out when I was kind of still in my dark period, but I guess I don't know enough about that to. I don't build a lot with like the city sets or Ninjago or those, even the superhero kits. I'm pretty selective. I bought the 60s era Batman because frankly I saw that show live, when it was premiered. So that's how old I am. So there's a lot of cultural references as an adult. Pretty fun with that set. In fact, it's sitting. I can look at it right now just because I leave that one up, or sections of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't do those sets as much. I enjoy those movies, but I don't necessarily build in that world. I think the stuff I build is more, and I don't know how to say it because I call it space. The Saturn V, moon rockets, shuttles, Curiosity, satellites. But it's not how Lego defines space. Space is kind of aliens.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's kind of a different. So when I'm searching space, I can't say space. I always have to put NASA or space exploration, or it's funny when I'm trying to find. And again, I've said I don't discount anybody's hobby, but those just don't excite me as much as the real stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. I can understand. Okay. Oh, very briefly though. It's Ninjago. Sorry, not Ninjago. It's Ninjago. So it's like ninja.
Ninjago.
Yeah, ninja and then go, but they don't like it Ninja Go. They say it Ninjago. It's different.
Okay. I stand corrected.
It'll save you some headache in the future. Trust me. But yeah.
Thank you.
You're okay. All right. I think that's about everything. In that case, Scott, thanks so much for taking the time to be here and to discuss the ins and outs of everything that you do with model making, with kits. I really appreciate it. I'd love to have you on again to talk about the lug side of things.
I was going to say, we did not get to that part. Yeah, we'll have to focus one.
Yeah.
Just on that. Yeah.
We'll make it
I'm all in for that. You bet.
Awesome. Excellent. In that case...
Hey, I want to... Everything that Kevin does, I want to do, right? So he did two...
You cut out there for a brief moment. Everything Kevin does, he does what?
I want to do. So he got 2 shows, I want to get 2 shows.
Okay. I can see this working.
Kevin, are you listening? Yeah.
All right. I'm down for this.
Okay.
All right. In that case, Scott, is there anywhere that you would like to promote, that you would like to plug, and is there anywhere on social media that you would like people to follow you at?
Sure. Kind of my Lego motif is really on Facebook at Idea Brickworks. I do have a website as well, ideabrickworks.com. And at some point, I'm going to have online sales. I'm still in the very beginnings of that because, again, my kits have been so regional. But I think the Saturn V is the first one that kind of goes outside the would have a national appeal. So I'll have that fairly soon. I'd sure like to plug the IdahoLUG, Idaho Lego User Group. And we have both Facebook and a website, although most of our communication is on website. IowaLUG, if you happen to be listening, both a Facebook and a website, and they're again very active. So Bricks and Minifig Idaho, Brooke and her crew are really over the top nice. They've been incredible supporters of both me personally and the LUG, and it's a real partnership. And the Saturn V happens to be there right now. So if you want to see the Saturn V, it's at probably for the next week or so, and then I'm discussions with several people as well. So I think that's it.
All right, perfect. In that case, I will have links to those in the description below, so I highly encourage you to check that out, especially if you're from Iowa or Idaho. And if you're from Idaho, well, thank goodness we need more people here. I'm telling you.
Yeah, we do.
We've only got 3 right now, so hopefully there'll be more.
Yes.
But all right, in that case, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all for listening and tuning in, be it live or the recorded version, which will hopefully be up this weekend, if not Tuesday. And yeah, if you have any questions and or comments, make sure to email those in to me, eljayjohnsen@gmail.com. I do check my email. Even if I don't respond right away, I do check everything. And I definitely like to have guest questions in email format, so that way I know where they are certifiably. And if you have any comments or questions or just general thoughts about things, of course, feel free to post a comment in the description below. And if you want any updates and guest announcements every single Tuesday, make sure to head on over to Twitter at the Eljay Johnsen. Remember, that's Johnsen. I swear, this gets a lot more varied as you get more into Lego, I promise you. So, yeah, that about covers it. Thank you all so very much for listening. And
thanks, Eljay.
Thank you, Scott. And everyone, have a wonderful weekend.